The wind whispered through the trees as the small town gathered around a wooden coffin in the graveyard, their faces pale and eyes red from crying. It was a cloudy afternoon, and the air felt thick with sadness, like even the sky didn't want to shine. The preacher's voice trembled as he spoke about love and loss, his words barely louder than the rustling leaves. People held hands, trying to stay strong, when out of nowhere a sharp bark sliced through the quiet. Heads jerked up. A scruffy brown dog, covered in mud and panting hard, bolted toward the crowd, his barks loud and wild. He didn't stop. Straight to the coffin he went, leaping onto it with a thud. His paws scratched at the wood, frantic, like he was digging for something. The crowd stumbled back, gasps rippling through them. A tall man in a black coat shouted, "Get that mud out of here!" But the dog didn't budge. His barking grew sharper, almost like a cry, and his eyes darted around, wide with something no one could name. The preacher froze, his Bible slipping in his hands. A little girl with pigtails tugged her mom's sleeve and whispered, "He looks scared, Mama." People stared, unsure what to do. Was this just some stray gone crazy, or was there more? The dog's claws left marks on the coffin, and his whines mixed with the wind, sending chills down spines. Sam's mom, standing closest to the grave, clutched a crumpled photo of her boy, her lips trembling. She didn't know this dog, did she? The barking wouldn't stop, echoing louder, pulling everyone's hearts into their throats. A lady in a blue scarf whispered, "What's he want?" But no one answered. Suspense hung heavy, like a storm about to break. The little girl stepped closer, her eyes big, and said, "Maybe he's trying to tell us something." The crowd held its breath, watching the dog's muddy fur ripple as he fought to be heard. Something big was happening, something they couldn't guess yet. Tears stopped falling, stuck in their eyes, as every face turned to that coffin, wondering what secret it held. The dog howled once more, and the world seemed to tilt. The dog's howls still rang in their ears as the crowd stood frozen, staring at the scratched-up coffin. Earlier that day, before the barking started, the graveyard had been quiet, filled only with sniffles and soft prayers. This was Sam's funeral, sweet 12-year-old Sam, who'd left the town in pieces after a car crash took him away. His mom hadn't stopped shaking since morning, her fingers tight around that photo of him grinning ear to ear, his messy hair falling into his eyes. In the picture, a scruffy brown dog sat by his side, Rusty, his shadow, his best buddy. Now, that same dog was here, going wild, and no one knew why. The preacher had been talking about Sam's big heart when it all began, how the boy would run through town with a laugh that made everyone smile. Kids from school stood in a huddle, their coats too big, wiping their noses on sleeves. Jake, Sam's best friend, kicked at the dirt, his chest aching because he never got to say goodbye. Sam's mom looked at the coffin, her eyes glassy, remembering how he'd sing to Rusty in the backyard. The accident happened a week ago, a rainy night, a slippery road, and Rusty had vanished right after. They thought he'd run off for good, scared or lost. But here he was, barking like his life depended on it, like Sam was calling him back. The crowd didn't know that part yet, didn't know Rusty had been missing. All they saw was a dog tearing at their goodbye, and it hurt and confused them. A lady in a gray hat whispered, "Why's he doing this now?" And a man next to her shrugged, his jaw tight. Sam's mom stepped closer to the coffin, her breath catching as Rusty's cries grew sharper. Was this just grief? Or something else? Jake looked up, his eyes red, and muttered, "He's acting like Sam's still here." The words hung there, heavy and impossible. The little girl from before tugged her mom's hand again, her voice small. What if he knows something we don't? No one answered, but the question stuck. The barking felt like a rope, pulling them toward a truth they weren't ready for, and every heart beat faster, caught between hope and fear. What was Rusty trying to say? The question lingered in the air. What was Rusty trying to say? As his barks bounced off the gravestones, raw and urgent. While the crowd wrestled with confusion, Rusty's story had started days ago, alone in the dark after the crash that stole Sam. That night, rain pounded the wrecked car, and Rusty bolted from the twisted metal, his fur soaked, his heart racing. Sam was gone, taken by flashing lights and sirens, and Rusty didn't understand. He just ran, paws sinking into mud, searching for his boy. The town slept unaware as he wandered fields and ditches, his nose low, sniffing for any trace of Sam's familiar smell, sweat, grass, and that cheap soap he loved. Thorns snagged his coat, tearing little cuts that stung, but he didn't stop. Hunger gnawed at his belly, and his legs shook, but every time he slowed, he'd hear Sam's whistle in his mind, clear as day, calling him home. A farmer spotted him once, leaning out of a creaky truck with a piece of bread, yelling, "Come here, pup!" But Rusty darted away, eyes wild, trusting only his nose. Miles stretched behind him, his paws bloody, his breath short, until he caught it. Sam's scent, faint but real, pulling him to the graveyard. Now, standing on the coffin, he smelled it stronger than ever, locked inside that wood. His barks turned to whimpers, soft and broken, as he pawed at the lid. Back in the crowd, Sam's mom watched, her hands trembling. She didn't know Rusty's journey, didn't know he'd fought through storms and hunger to get here. All she saw was her boy's dog, lost and loud, like he refused to let Sam go. Jake squinted, his voice cracking. He's been gone all week. Where'd he even come from? The little girl's mom shushed her, but the girl whispered anyway. He looks so tired. Rusty's muddy fur stuck to his sides, his ribs poking out, but his eyes burned with something fierce. The crowd shifted, uneasy, as his whimpers grew desperate. Was Sam really in there? Or was Rusty chasing a ghost? Every scratch on the coffin tightened their chests, pulling them deeper into the mystery. The wind picked up, cold and sharp, and Rusty's cries felt like they held a secret too big to stay buried. The wind carried Rusty's cries across the graveyard, sharp and full of that secret he seemed desperate to spill. His paws scraped harder at the coffin, nails digging into the wood, leaving jagged lines. Then, out of the quiet between his barks, a faint thud echoed from inside. The crowd went still, like the world held its breath. Sam's mom gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, and the photo slipped from her fingers, fluttering to the grass. "What's that noise?" she cried, her voice breaking. The preacher dropped his Bible with a soft thump, his face pale. Another thud, weak but real, came again, and Rusty howled, long and loud, his whole body shaking. People whispered, "Did you hear that?" And "No, it can't be." A man with a gray beard grabbed a shovel from the dirt pile, his hands trembling as he stepped forward. "We gotta open it," he said, voice low, like he was afraid to mean it. The little girl clutched her mom's skirt, eyes huge, while Jake stared at the coffin, his fists clenched. "Is Sam alive?" he breathed, too quiet for anyone to hear. No one dared say it louder, but the thought buzzed through them all. Impossible. Crazy hope twisting with fear. Rusty's barks turned wilder, his nose pressed to the wood, like he could smell life inside. The crowd pressed closer, tears spilling fresh down cheeks, caught in a storm of what-ifs. The man with the shovel hesitated, looking at Sam's mom. She nodded, her lips quivering, and he jammed the blade under the lid. The wood creaked, loud in the silence, and every sound stabbed at their hearts. Rusty jumped back, then forward again, whining, his tail stiff. "Hurry!" the little girl squeaked, and her mom didn't shush her this time. The preacher mumbled a prayer, words tumbling over each other as the lid loosened. What was in there? Was Rusty right? The air crackled with tension, thick and electric, like lightning might strike any second. Sam's mom sank to her knees, sobbing, "Please, please," not even sure what she was begging for. The crowd leaned in, eyes locked on the coffin, tears mixing with dirt on their faces. Another thud, louder now, and Rusty's howl rose to the sky. They were about to find out. The crowd held its breath as the coffin lid groaned open, Rusty's howl still ringing in their ears. The man with the shovel pried it up, wood splintering, and everyone leaned in, hearts pounding. A gasp ripped through the air, not Sam, but a tiny white kitten, curled in the corner, its fur matted and eyes barely open. It let out a weak meow, softer than the thuds they'd heard, and the crowd blinked, stunned. Sam's mom fell back, tears streaming, and whispered, "Snowball?" Rusty stopped barking, his nose nudging the kitten gently, like he'd known all along. The little girl clapped her hands, squealing, "It's alive!" And the man dropped the shovel, wiping his brow. Snowball, Sam's kitten, the one he'd found shivering in a storm last summer and nursed back to health with a bottle and a blanket. The crowd pieced it together, voices overlapping. Was she in the car? How'd she get in there? The accident flashed in their minds. Sam swerving to miss a deer, the car flipping, the chaos. Maybe Snowball had been with him, scared and hiding, unnoticed by the rescuers. Somehow, she'd ended up in the coffin, trapped but alive. Rusty had found her, tracked her here, fought to save her. Sam's mom reached in, scooping the kitten into her arms, her sobs turning soft. "He loved you so much," she said, kissing its tiny head. Rusty licked Snowball's fur, his tail wagging slow, like he'd finished his job. Jake knelt beside them, his voice shaky. "He didn't give up, did he?" The preacher nodded, eyes wet, and said, "That dog knew what we didn't." People wiped their faces, tears falling not from sadness but from something warm and bright. Rusty wasn't mourning, he was rescuing, just like Sam always did. The little girl giggled through her sniffles. "He's a hero!" And her mom hugged her tight. The crowd buzzed, passing Snowball's story down the line. How Sam's kindness lived on in this scruffy dog who wouldn't quit. Sam's mom looked at Rusty, her voice steady now. "You saved her for him." The coffin lay open, empty of Sam but full of meaning. Hearts swelled, heavy grief lifting just a little. Rusty sat proud, Snowball purring against him, and the truth settled in, they'd witnessed a miracle. The truth of Rusty's miracle sank into the crowd, warm and real, as Snowball purred against his muddy fur. Sam's mom held the kitten close, her tears slowing, and knelt beside Rusty, running her fingers through his tangled coat. "You didn't give up on us," she whispered, her voice thick with love. Rusty's big brown eyes met hers, soft and steady, like he understood every word. Jake crouched down too, wiping his face with his sleeve, a small smile breaking through. "You're my friend now too, okay?" he said, patting Rusty's head. The dog's tail thumped the ground, slow but sure. The crowd circled them, their sobs turning to murmurs, then to quiet laughs as they watched the scruffy hero lick Snowball clean. The little girl's mom lifted her up so she could see, and the girl waved at Rusty, whispering, "You're the best." People started sharing stories, how Sam once climbed a tree to save a stuck kite, how he'd share his lunch with anyone hungry. "That's why Rusty did it," the preacher said, his voice strong now. "This dog loved Sam more than we knew." Heads nodded, eyes shining. The graveyard didn't feel cold anymore. It glowed with something alive, something Sam left behind. A lady in a red coat laid a flower by the coffin, saying, "He's still here in them." Sam's mom hugged Rusty tighter. Snowball nestled between them, and the crowd's tears changed. Happy ones now, warm and bright. Jake stood up, brushing dirt off his knees, and looked at the sky. Sam would have laughed at all this fuss, he said, and a few people chuckled, picturing it. The man with the shovel clapped Jake's shoulder, grinning, "That dog's a fighter just like him." Rusty's ears perked like he agreed. The crowd lingered, not ready to leave, passing Snowball gently from hand to hand, petting Rusty's muddy fur like he was theirs too. "He ran all that way for her," the little girl said, and her mom nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks again. Sam's mom stood, cradling the kitten, and looked at Rusty with a promise. "We're a family now," she said. The air felt lighter, grief bending into awe. They'd lost Sam, but his loyalty, his heart, stood right there, wagging its tail. Rusty's tail kept wagging, a steady beat in the fading light, as Sam's mom held Snowball close and made her promise. They were a family now. The sun dipped low, painting the sky orange and pink, and the crowd started to drift from the graveyard, their steps slow but lighter. They left flowers by Sam's grave, not with heavy hearts anymore, but with soft smiles. Sam's mom walked home, Rusty trotting beside her, his muddy paws leaving prints on the path. Snowball peeked out from her arms, eyes brighter now, meowing faintly. Jake tagged along, kicking a pebble, and said, "I'll visit every day, if that's okay." She nodded, her eyes warm. Sam would like that. The town buzzed as they went. Kids ran up, asking, "Is that the hero dog?" And grown-ups shook their heads in wonder, whispering, "Never seen anything like it." By morning, the story spread, how Rusty turned a sad day into something beautiful. Kids at school drew pictures of him, crayons scratching out his scruffy fur and big heart, calling him Sam's guardian. Sam's mom set up a little bed by the fireplace, and that night Rusty curled up with Snowball next to Sam's old bike, its bells still shiny. She watched them, her chest full, and whispered, "You're home now." The crowd's tears had dried, replaced by grins and stories swapped over fences. The little girl from the funeral tugged her mom to their porch, pointing at the stars. "Sam's up there, smiling," she said, and her mom hugged her tight, believing it. Jake stopped by the next day, tossing a stick for Rusty to chase, laughing when he brought it back muddy. The town felt different, warmer, closer, like Sam's love had stitched them together. Sam's mom kept Rusty's fur brushed and Snowball's belly full, a quiet promise to her boy. The final scene stayed with them all. Rusty and Snowball, peaceful by that bike, a scruffy dog and a tiny kitten holding Sam's spirit alive. His loyalty hadn't left. It ran through every wag, every purr. Now they'd tell his story forever. A tale of a dog who wouldn't quit. Want to share Sam and Rusty's adventure with someone? Pass it on. It's a story worth telling.